It sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks. It's not my favorite disease. I've had a couple. It's not my favorite one.
But it was just, I got scared. I got scared of kind of repeating myself. Wasn't it? What a stupid move that was, right?
Basically, after playing Kelly Bundy on Married with Children,
She smiled through the diagnosis. She smiled through the surgeries. She smiled through everything the last 4 years threw at her. But what just came out about Christina Applegate is the one thing that Smile was never built to survive. The appearance that broke the silence.
Whatever reason that my legs aren't working that day. Like right now, I could barely get to the bathroom. It's just the worst, but that's neither here nor there. But I just...
She has survived cancer. She has survived surgeries that would have broken most people. She has survived years of pain that she mostly kept to herself. But what happened on the 12th of January, 2026, is the moment everything she had been holding together finally came undone in public. And what her team did in the hours that followed is the part of the story nobody has fully told yet. The Golden Globe Awards were being held that night at the Beverly Hilton in Beverly Hills. Christina Applegate had not appeared at a major public ceremony in close to 3 years. The last time most people had seen her at an event like this, she had been careful and composed, projecting the image of a woman who had the situation under control. That image did not survive the night of the 12th of January. She stepped out from the wings to present an award alongside Jamie Lee Curtis. The camera found her immediately, and what it caught was not her outfit or her hair. It was the way she was moving, slowly, carefully, with the kind of concentration a person uses when they are working very hard not to fall in front of millions of people. The cane in her hand was not a statement. It was a necessity, and the people in that room understood the difference before she reached the podium. The audience rose to their feet before she said a single word. She looked out at them, and her expression shifted between something that looked like gratitude and something that looked like exhaustion. She made the joke. She said she might be falling apart, but she was still standing more or less. The room laughed because that is what you do when someone you love makes a joke to stop you from crying. Now, here is what was not broadcast. 3 separate entertainment journalists reported in the 48 hours after the ceremony, each citing different people inside the venue, that Christina left the stage and did not return to the main room for the rest of the night. She was guided backstage by a handler whom nobody in her public circle could identify. Not her husband, not her management, not any friend who has been photographed with her before. She was taken to a private area, and she stayed there. No photograph of her leaving the building appeared anywhere. Her team said nothing. No statement was released that night or the morning after. And then her Instagram went silent for 9 days. For a woman who had been using that account to speak directly to her followers through health updates and raw personal reflections, 9 days of silence were immediately noticed. Her followers noticed, journalists noticed, and the people inside her circle who were paying close attention noticed most of all. When she finally posted on the 21st of January, 2026, it was not what anyone expected. There was no health update. No thank you to the people who had been flooding her comments with messages. Just a single photograph of her 12-year-old daughter, Sadie Grace Lenoble, taken in a corridor with flat institutional lighting. The caption read, "This one saves me every single day." 3 things stood out to the people who follow her closely. First, Christina was not in the photograph. Second, Sadie was not smiling. Third, and most importantly, she used the word saves, not helps, not inspires, saves. That is not the language of a woman describing ordinary motherhood. That is the language of someone who has genuinely been in danger of going under. Something happened between the Golden Globe stage and that Instagram post. Something her team has been quietly working to manage ever since. And to understand what it was, you have to go back much further than 2026. You have to go back to where Christina Applegate's story actually started. Because the beginning of this story is darker than most people realize. The girl the industry built before she could choose. Christina Ann Applegate was born on the 25th of November, 1971 in Hollywood, California. Her father was Robert William Applegate, a record executive and talent manager. Her mother was Nancy Lee Pretty, an actress and singer who had spent years chasing a breakthrough that never fully arrived. Nancy was talented, Nancy was determined, and Nancy had a daughter she loved deeply, and she introduced her to the entertainment industry before the daughter could walk properly. Christina appeared in her first television commercial at 3 months old. She was cast alongside her mother. That is not a detail casually mentioned in profiles about her. That detail tells you everything about the world she was born into and the speed at which it claimed her. By the time Christina was 5, she had appeared in several more commercials. By 9, she had a role in a television series. By her early teens, she was moving through audition rooms and callbacks with the ease of someone who had never known any other kind of life. To the outside world, that looked like confidence. To the people who understand how the industry works, it looked like something else entirely. Here is what nobody was asking at the time. Christina had not chosen this world. She had been placed inside it before she was old enough to understand that choosing was even an option. And by the time she was old enough to make real decisions for herself, the industry had already done its work. Her identity was wrapped around her usefulness as a performer. Her value, in the language of everyone surrounding her, was always connected to whether she could book the job. That is a particular kind of pressure to place on a child, and it leaves a particular kind of mark. In 1987, when Christina was 15 years old, she was cast as Kelly Bundy in the Fox sitcom Married with Children. The show ran for 11 seasons and ended in 1997. It made her a household name. It also locked a very specific version of her into the public imagination at an age when she was still privately trying to figure out who she actually was. Kelly Bundy was loud, funny, and deliberately written not to be taken seriously. Christina played the role brilliantly, but the role came with a cost that took years to become visible. The image the public attached to her during those formative years was not an image she had built for herself. It was an image the writers built, the producers dressed, and the network sold. And she carried it into adulthood, whether she wanted to or not. Now here is the part of those years that is only recently beginning to surface. In 2023, Christina began speaking in interviews about events from her younger years in the industry. She never named them directly. She used careful language. She spoke the way someone speaks when they have done a great deal of private processing and are still deciding how much of it the public deserves to hear. She described experiences that shaped her in ways she was still working through. She said she had spent a long time being the person the industry needed her to be, and a much shorter time figuring out who she actually was underneath it. Her co-star David Faustino spoke separately in 2021 about the intensity of the environment on the Married with Children set during its early years. He did not go into detail, but the way he described it suggested that what the camera showed and what was happening around the edges of the production were not always the same thing. Nobody followed up on that thread properly at the time. The entertainment press moved on. Christina moved on publicly, or appeared to. She built a film career through the 1990s and 2000s. She earned a Tony Award nomination for Sweet Charity on Broadway in 2005. She won an Emmy for her guest appearance on Friends in 2003. From the outside, it looked like a life that had worked out exactly as it was supposed to. But the foundation underneath that life had cracks in it that went back a very long way. And the next chapter of her story is where those cracks first became impossible to ignore. The marriages, the quiet, and the cracks. Christina Applegate has been married twice, and if you only read the headlines from both marriages, you would conclude that she was simply unlucky in love. But the people who were close to her during those years will tell you something different. They will tell you that what looked like bad luck from the outside was actually the visible surface of something much deeper and much older, something that started long before either husband entered the picture. Her first marriage was to actor Jonathan Shaich. They wed on the 22nd of October, 1996. Christina was 24 years old. Shaich was charming, well regarded in Hollywood circles, and appeared to be exactly the kind of partner a rising actress builds a stable life with. They separated in 2001 and finalized their divorce in 2002 after roughly 5 years together. Years later, Shaich made a disclosure that reframed the entire marriage. He publicly confirmed that he is gay, something he had not fully understood or accepted during the years he and Christina were together. Christina has never spoken about him with anything other than quiet dignity. She has never blamed him. She has never used his story to generate sympathy for herself. She simply closed that chapter and moved forward in the way she moves through most painful things, by going very still and saying very little. But Here is the thing about going still and saying very little. It is not the same as healing. And the people who knew Christina between 2002 and 2008, in the years between her first and second marriage, describe a woman who was working extremely hard, professionally and personally, while carrying a weight she was not putting down. Then came the breast cancer diagnosis. In 2008, Christina was diagnosed with breast cancer at 36 years old. She later revealed that she carried the BRCA1 genetic mutation, which significantly elevates the risk of both breast and ovarian cancer. She made the decision to undergo a double mastectomy. She spoke about that decision publicly and with remarkable clarity. She said she wanted to be proactive. She said she wanted to take control of the one thing she could control. What she did not say publicly, but what people close to her have described since, is how isolating that period was and how much of the fear she processed entirely alone. It was during this same period that she met Martin Lenoble. He is a Dutch musician, a bassist best known for his work with the rock band Porno for Pyros. They began dating in 2008, became engaged in 2010, and married in February of 2013. Their daughter Sadie Grace Lenoble was born on the 27th of January, 2011, 2 years before the wedding. From the outside, the second marriage looked like the reward at the end of a very hard road. Christina had survived cancer. She had come through surgery. She had found someone who seemed genuinely devoted to her. And together, they had a daughter who became the most publicly visible source of joy in her life. The narrative wrote itself neatly, and the entertainment press was happy to print it. But people within the marriage tell a quieter, more complicated story. Friends who spent time with Christina and Martin during the middle years of the marriage describe a dynamic that was loving in some ways and quietly strained in others. Christina, by multiple accounts, had always been the one carrying the household emotionally. She was the one managing the public image, the schedules, and the needs of everyone around her, while keeping her own health in the background. Martin was present. But present and carrying equal weight are not the same thing. By 2020, something had shifted noticeably. Christina was seen at fewer events with Martin. When she did speak about her marriage in interviews, the warmth was still there, but it was accompanied by a careful vagueness that had not always been present. She chose her words around him, the way someone chooses words when they are protecting a situation they are not sure how to describe yet. And then, in 2021, the diagnosis arrived, making everything else feel secondary. The diagnosis did not just change her health, it changed the entire architecture of her daily life, her relationships, and the private story that is only now beginning to come fully into the light. The diagnosis that rewrote everything. In August of 2021, Christina Applegate told the world she had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. She announced it on Twitter in a single post. She said she had been on quite a journey and had the support of her family and closest friends. She asked for privacy. She asked for kindness. And then she went quiet for a very long time. Multiple sclerosis is a disease of the central nervous system. It attacks the protective covering of nerve fibers and disrupts the signals between the brain and the body. It can affect movement, balance, vision, and cognition. It is chronic, which means it does not go away. It is unpredictable, which means the person living with it cannot plan around it. And it is progressive in many cases, meaning the baseline can shift without warning or permission. For a woman who had already had her body altered permanently by a double mastectomy, the arrival of a second major diagnosis was not simply a medical event. It was a psychological one. People who have spoken to Christina during this period describe someone who went through a grief process that she largely kept hidden from public view. Not because she was ashamed, but because she had spent her entire life performing strength for an audience, the habit was deeply ingrained. What made this period even harder was the timing. By 2021, the entire world had spent over a year locked inside because of the pandemic. Social isolation, which is difficult for most people, is particularly damaging for someone whose neurological condition is directly worsened by stress. Christina was at home, managing her symptoms, her daughter's schooling, and a marriage already showing the strain that Chapter 3 of this story described, and doing most of it without the kind of support network that ordinary life would have allowed her to maintain. Her close friend and Dead to Me, co-star Linda Cardellini, gave an interview in late 2022 in which she described visiting Christina during the production of the final season of their show. She said Christina had come to sit in a wheelchair on some days. She said watching her prepare for scenes, physically and mentally, had been one of the most profound things she had witnessed in her professional life. She described Christina as someone who refused to let the disease define what she was capable of, even on the days when it was clearly winning. Dead to Me filmed its third and final season with full knowledge of Christina's diagnosis. The production was adjusted around her needs. Scenes were restructured. The physical demands on her were reduced wherever possible. And Christina delivered a performance that earned her another Emmy nomination, which told you everything you needed to know about the distance between what was happening to her body and what she was still capable of producing from it. But here is what that Emmy nomination did not show. What it did not show was the cost of those production days. What it did not show was what happened after the cameras stopped and Christina went home. Multiple people who were present during that filming period have described, in careful, off-the-record terms, a woman who poured everything she had into those scenes and arrived home with almost nothing left. The fatigue associated with multiple sclerosis is not ordinary tiredness. It is a specific and brutal kind of exhaustion that does not respond to sleep the way normal fatigue does. And Christina was experiencing it at a level that her public appearances would never convey. By 2023, she had begun using a cane regularly. She spoke in interviews about the 50 pounds she had gained as a result of the disease and the medications used to manage it. She spoke about it with the same dry humor she had always used to deflect difficult truths. She joked about her new body, about her changed walk, about the gap between who she had been physically and who she was now. The jokes were funny. They were also a way to say something real while keeping the room from getting too quiet. What she did not joke about was her marriage, and by 2023, that silence around her marriage had become its own kind of statement. The people around her were beginning to see a picture forming that Christina herself had not yet spoken about publicly. A picture that involved not just her health, but the people closest to her, the support she was or was not receiving, and a set of circumstances at home that were quietly becoming untenable. And what happened next is the part of this story that nobody fully prepared for. Not her friends, not her team, and not Christina herself. The turn nobody saw, coming by, early 2024, people inside Christina Applegate's circle had begun to notice something that went beyond the usual updates about her health. The conversations they were having with her had changed in tone. She was not just describing physical struggle, she was describing something lonelier and more complicated than that. And the details she was sharing, carefully and in pieces, pointed toward a situation at home that had been deteriorating for longer than anyone outside that home had realized. The first public signal came in March of 2024, when Christina posted a message on Instagram that stopped her followers mid-scroll. It was not dramatic, it did not name anyone, but it spoke about going through something privately that had required her to completely reassess who she was letting into her life and who she was choosing to let go. She used the phrase chosen family. She used it deliberately and more than once. And anyone who has spent time around people navigating difficult marriages knows exactly what that phrase sounds like when it is doing double duty. 3 weeks later, Martin Lenoble was not present at a small public appearance Christina made at a fundraising event in Los Angeles. His absence was noted but not widely reported at the time. It was the kind of absence that gets filed away and revisited later, which is exactly what happened. By the summer of 2024, multiple entertainment reporters had received independent tips suggesting that Christina and Martin had separated. None of them ran the story immediately because they couldn't get official confirmation from either side. Christina's team declined to comment. Martin had no public representative responding to inquiries. The silence from both sides was total and coordinated, suggesting that both parties had, at a minimum, agreed on one thing. They were not going to discuss it publicly. Then, in October of 2024, Christina gave a long interview to a major publication in which she spoke about redefining her life in her early 50s. She spoke about learning to ask for help. She spoke about the specific loneliness of being ill in a world that is not built for people who cannot move through it at full speed. She spoke about her daughter Sadie with a fierceness that went well beyond ordinary maternal pride. She described Sadie as the person who had kept her anchored when everything else was shifting. She did not mention Martin once in the entire interview. A publication that has consistently covered her career noted the omission in a follow-up piece. A source described by the publication as someone with direct knowledge of the situation told them that the marriage had effectively ended and that the practicalities of the separation were still being worked through. The source added one detail that has stayed in circulation ever since. They said that Christina had not left the marriage. The marriage had, in a series of gradual and painful ways, left her. Now, here is where the story takes a turn that nobody was prepared for. Multiple sources, speaking separately to different journalists between late 2024 and early 2025, described a financial situation that was significantly more pressured than Christina's public profile suggested. The entertainment work had slowed considerably since her diagnosis. Dead to Me had ended. The film offers that what had kept her income consistent through her 40s was no longer arriving at the same rate, and the costs associated with managing a serious chronic illness, the treatments, the medications, the specialist appointments, the home adjustments required to accommodate her changing mobility, were substantial and ongoing. One source described her as being in a position where the gap between her public image and her private financial reality had become genuinely stressful. Another described conversations in which Christina had spoken about the pressure of maintaining a home and raising a daughter largely on her own, while her body was making every practical task harder than it had ever been before. Her daughter Sadie, who turned 13 in January of 2025, had by multiple accounts become far more than a source of emotional comfort. People who have spent time with them describe a dynamic in which Sadie had taken on a quiet, watchful role in the household. She was attentive to her mother in a way that went beyond what most children her age demonstrate. She noticed when her mother was having a difficult day before Christina said anything. She adjusted her own behavior around it. She had, in the particular way that children of unwell parents sometimes do, grown up faster than she should have had to. That detail is the one that people who genuinely care about Christina find hardest to sit with. Not the diagnosis, not the marriage, not the financial pressure. The image of a 13-year-old girl quietly becoming the most reliable source of stability in her mother's daily life is the detail that lands differently from everything else. And it is that detail, more than any other single element of this story, that explains the caption Christina posted in late January of 2026 beneath that photograph taken in a corridor with institutional lighting. "This one saves me every single day." She was not being poetic. She was not reaching for a touching turn of phrase. She was telling the exact truth in the only way she currently knew how, and the people around her who read that caption and felt a chill were right to feel it. Because what comes next in this story has not finished unfolding yet. What she said, what it means, and what comes next. In February of 2026, roughly 3 weeks after the Instagram post that stopped her followers cold, Christina Applegate gave a short interview to a journalist she had spoken to before and trusted. It was not a major sit-down. It was not a cover story. It was a brief, carefully managed conversation that her team approved because they understood that the silence had gone on long enough and was beginning to generate more speculation than the truth would. She said she was taking it one day at a time. She said the multiple sclerosis had progressed in ways that had required her to make significant adjustments to how she lived and what she expected from each day. She said she had gone through changes in her personal life that had been painful but necessary. And then she said something that her interviewer later described as the most honest thing she had heard from a public figure in years. She said that the hardest part of everything she had been through was not the physical pain. It was the realization that some of the people she had expected to show up for her simply had not, and that learning to live with that truth had taken more out of her than any diagnosis ever could. She did not name anyone. She did not point fingers. But she did not need to. The people who had been following this story closely knew exactly which absences she was describing, and the people inside her circle who had watched those absences happen in real time said privately that hearing her acknowledge it, even in those careful and guarded terms, felt like a door finally opening after a very long time. The question that remains, and the one that her supporters are sitting with right now, is what the next chapter of her life actually looks like in practical terms. her mobility has continued to change. Multiple sclerosis does not pause while everything else in a person's life is being reorganized. The disease continues on its own timeline, regardless of what else is happening around it. People who have seen her recently describe her as managing, but in a way that requires the full deployment of every resource available to her. There is not much surplus. There is not much room for additional difficulty. Sadie remains the central figure in her daily emotional life. Christina has spoken about her daughter in nearly every public statement she has made since the diagnosis. And the consistency of that is not accidental. Sadie is the thread she keeps returning to because Sadie is the reason she keeps returning to anything at all. That is a beautiful thing and a heavy thing at the same time. Professionally, there are conversations happening. People inside the industry who have worked with Christina describe a genuine desire from casting directors and producers to find the right project for her, something that works around her current physical reality rather than pretending it does not exist. Whether that materializes into something concrete in 2026 remains to be seen. What is not in question is the woman herself. Christina Applegate was shaped by an industry that took from her before she was old enough to protect herself. She was marked by a disease that did not ask permission. She was let down by people who should have stayed. And she is still here, still posting, still speaking in that dry, undeceived voice that has always been the most authentically hers. Still putting one foot in front of the other on the days when that is genuinely all that is possible. The scandal, if that is even the right word for what this story has become, is not really about a single dark turn. It is about a woman whose life has been full of dark turns, and who has never once pretended otherwise. That is not a scandal, that is survival. And survival, as anyone who has watched this story knows by now, has always been what Christina Applegate does best. Christina Applegate has never asked anyone to feel sorry for her. She has only ever asked to be seen honestly. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you are still standing through something difficult right now, so is she.